kept in the dark, tightly shut, hidden and guarded, never to be found. They tell ghastly stories about our past, of things we said or did, felt or thought, stories about humiliation, threats, pain and suffering, stories that show us in poor light, that demean us and our strength. We feel ashamed because of them, believing we did something untellable. We fear being judged, rejected or shamed.
In a majority of cases of child sexual abuse, the abuser is known to the victim. Grooming is the process by which the predator systematically gains the trust of the potential child victim, sometimes even the child's family. Identifying the victim. The perpetrator targets a potential victim based on vulnerabilities.
I was 7 when I was sexually abused. My abuser was my uncle. By the time I was 11 or 12, he gang raped me. He got people home and they had sex with me one after the other.
At the time of puberty, you start developing breasts and then you start wearing bras, and almost like a very common thing that, okay, so the teachers would come and feel up your back under the pretext of, patting you, and they will touch you in a way which makes you really uncomfortable and you want to it's kind of very creepy. The same teacher who would do it to me would, there were girls talking about it, and I heard that one teacher said that if you want to complain about it, you have to give it in writing. And I'm talking about 30 years back. So there was no concept of, there was no POCSO, there was no policy, there was no child-friendly practices, there was no child sexual abuse as a term only was not known. So nobody actually got down to giving a written complaint, and it just continued.
Gaining trust of the victim. The abuser watches and gathers information on the child's needs. He could then engage the child by offering special attention and a sympathetic ear in such a manner as to gain their friendship.
If they have to gain the trust of the child and ensure that the child doesn't speak out to anyone else, they need to gain the trust of the family as well. It's a pattern that predators usually follow, and if we don't see that pattern and if we don't educate our children, then we are actually doing a great disservice. So you might educate your child about good touch, bad touch, or rather safe touch and unsafe touch, but if you don't tell your child that safe touch and unsafe touch could also be from these respectable people in our family also, then you have done half your work. You have not done your work completely.
Grooming is a very real thing that happens, and that is what makes it possible for an abuser to abuse a kid in a family setting or a school setting over a sustained period of time, because they win the trust of the kid, they win the trust of the parents, and they win or if it happens in a school, they enjoy a position of trust in the school with the management, with other teachers. So they will never, so you are the most unsuspecting person, and grooming is a process which desensitizes the kid to, in a way disempowers the child and make sure that it is not reported, and if it's reported, the child would not be believed. It's very intimidating. Can you picture like a 6-year or a 3-year or a 5-year-old and this full grown adult, if he is taking you to the loo and undressing you or touching your penis or touching your vagina or slipping his hands under or taking off his clothes in front of you, it's too shocking and too intimidating a thing. You don't know how to describe it. And if the message is only nobody should touch your private parts, and if he's not touched the child's private part, what is the child supposed to say? He'll just start avoiding going to the loo, then he'll start avoiding going for maths tuitions if it's a maths teacher. The child will stop going to the play period, and then the parents, children always try to tell us indirectly.
Creating secrecy around the relationship. The abuser could share feelings and secrets and buy gifts for the child. The abuser is likely to instruct the child to keep it a secret from her parents and friends.
I think predators usually groom their victims in a way that the victim doesn't speak up. that the victim doesn't scream. It happened in my case, and my case is not an isolated case. It happens with most people whom I've spoken to around 50,000 odd survivors in a span of 18 years that I've been speaking up. It is a pattern where the predator either uses love as a shield, saying that, you know what, this is a secret and I love you so much, and this is our little secret and we will do this together. Aren't you enjoying it? And make the victim feel like the victim, he or she or Z, is a play, a party to the whole thing.
Initiating sexual contact. Physical contact may start as a game of touching that may seem casual and not overtly sexual. Gradually, the abuser initiates sexual touching, having broken the child's inhibitions. Child psychologists say, over time, the child often believes she allowed the abuse to happen and finds it difficult to report it to her parents or her caregivers.
They'll just touch you so-called harmlessly, or just brush against you first, and you're like, okay, and otherwise this is a good teacher, cool teacher. Then slowly you'll do something more and something more like that. So before you know it, you're in a situation where you feel like you're trapped and you can't say no to abuse, as if you took part in it, you participated in it, you gave your consent, or you were okay with it.
Maintaining control over the child. The abuser could use emotional coercion to continue the abuse. At other times, the abuser could threaten the child that she will not be believed, but that the child provoked the abuse.
I firmly believe that how disclosure is handled goes a long way to ensure whether the child will have long-term impact of the abuse or not. So the intensity or the frequency of the abuse or the nature of the abuse in itself may not really have that said impact or effects of sexual abuse, short-term and long-term, that we read about. They can be avoided if you handle the disclosure sensitively, you're present, you believe the child, you are sure that you give the message to the child that it's never his or her fault, you make sure that the child will be safe, and you also kind of are present to what the child is going through.
Trust your child. Don't ever tell your child that, did this happen really? Did this happen? Oh really? Oh, I find it a little difficult to digest. Never use any negation with the child. There will be people who will tell you that children usually make up these stories. No one makes up these stories when it comes to issues of child sexual abuse. So please trust your child completely, without any bias.
Grooming the parents. It isn't just the child who is groomed. Very often, the abuser works to develop a trusting relationship with the parents. This is to make the parents feel their child is in safe company, even when alone with the abuser. Very often, this makes it difficult for the child to report the abuse.
A lot of times when we read cases or hear stories of people who are talking about their abuse, we wonder that how come this person couldn't say no at the age of 14, 18. What we don't realize is that the abuse started happening when the kid was 5 or 6, and the abuser took advantage of some vulnerability. Either the child was feeling neglected and was looking for love, or they were feeling unwanted, or there were too many kids, parents were not looking after them, or it was a nuclear family, parents are fighting, and it could be n number. There's no one reason why the child can't say no. So when the child can't say no, that's where basically the abuser takes advantage of the fact that the child is not able to say no, or he will not go and report it, or even if he reports it, he'll not be believed. One of those, and there are so many factors like that. Parents also then need to make sure that just because you've had that so-called good touch, bad touch talk with your child once a year is not enough. So you need to keep having those talks with your kid, and in a very matter of fact way. You know, a lot of times when I have had workshops with parents or teachers, they feel that now we are becoming paranoid and we are going to instill fear in children. There are many ways of talking to children and empowering them, and you don't have to have fear in the whole equation, because the person the person who is abusing is in a position of trust and authority over the kid, and that is what allows the abuse to go on for sustained period.
Khandan ka sharam is something that parents actually victimize children with, that it's a secret that needs to remain in my family. And if it's a woman, if it's a girl child, it's like, oh my god, the virginity is gone and now this girl is not going to get married to anyone in life. If it's a male child, the male child is told that why didn't you fight back? You should have fought back at that moment, you know. And now how do I go and tell the whole world that my child was a sissy who didn't fight back despite being a male child? ये तो खानदान का चिराग है जो लड़ नहीं पाया लोगों से. So I think those are signs of bad parenting.
Take that box of secrets out in the sun, dust them, hug them, let them breathe. Not everyone looks at them with blame and shock. There are so many fellow ex-owners of these deep, dark secrets who are now happy and free.